Good morning. There are lights, but they're okay. The Lord save us. I feel a bit. How did I wander in here from Mangerton Mountain? But I'm here anyway to talk about. Is it Prometheus? I think the title is Prometheus and the Dolphin. But before I get there, can I just maybe get the bad news over first? Because I live alone a lot, and I think a lot of the time, and dream a lot of the time, and because there's no one around me that I can talk to, I get away with the kind of conclusions I come to. There's no one to contradict me at all, and maybe the conclusions would need testing, and can I test them with you here? Can I get the bad news out of the way first? One of the things I've been thinking for a couple of years now is that the fact is there are 6,000 million human beings now on the earth. And it seems to me that in our behaviour on the earth, we are AIDS virus to the earth. We are doing to the earth what the AIDS virus does to the human body. We're breaking down its immune system. Just as you'd say of a human being that he or she is HIV positive, I sometimes feel now like saying the earth is HSS positive. It is Homo sapiens, sapiens positive. It is positive with us. I'll put that another way. Scientists now tell us that the earth is 4,600 million years old, and it has come on a tremendous voyage. It has voyaged inorganically, but I would believe not unalively, for a couple of billion years, maybe 3 billion years. Then something extraordinary happened. We had the first proteins, we had the primordial soup. At the time of the Cambrian, then you had multicellular life, something like an explosion of multicellular life. So the earth voyaged with the first protein. It voyaged inorganically. It voyaged with the first proteins. It voyaged with the first amino acids. It voyaged with the first multicellular animals. It voyaged with trilobite and ammonite and the brachiopods, and it voyaged with the first fish, and it voyaged with the first creature that came out of the water onto the land. It voyaged with reptiles. It voyaged with mammals. It voyaged with simians, and now it is voyaging with us. And it seems to me that it has crashed into us, and I'm not so sure that the earth is going to survive the crash. We are the iceberg into which the voyaging earth has crashed. And it would be a pity, I think, if it did go, if we finally were responsible for some major calamity and disaster to the earth. But that's what I feel happens. I don't know, of course, that that's what is happening. I have no final or formal knowledge that that is the case. I'm not presenting that as a fact. I'm talking out of fear and out of worry and out of regret and out of disappointment about the way we are on the earth. I worry about us human beings. Are we, in a strict Darwinian sense, fit at all? Are we a strange combination? Are we too complex to manage ourselves? And have we mostly mismanaged ourselves in virtually all the cultures that we have known? So that's where I want to start. It's against that context that I want to say the few things that I feel I'd like to say. I arrived in Connemara after a European education and after teaching in a university for 7 years. And as university life and academic life fell away from me and I walked up into the valleys in Connemara, I felt that my European educated head was in some way out of tune with the world, radically out of tune in its education, radically a distortion of what reality was out there. If I was to mirror reality, I would be a distorting mirror, mirroring reality. And it was very sad for me to feel that somehow or other my eyes and my mind were misformed, had been misformed by a European education, and that I had to unmake myself, radically unmake myself, if I was to get back in touch with the universe of the world again. And there was one day I was out in the bogs in Ballyconneely. I lived in great solitude for 3 years. I would go up and I'd spend maybe 7 or 8 hours sitting by a waterfall up in the 12 Bends, and I would know that no one would come by today. So I would be in great solitude inside of the mountains. And wonderful and strange and dangerous things happen to you when you do that day after day after day after day. You slip into states of mind that are strange, that are subversive, that alter your way of knowing and perceiving. But one day anyway, I went out into the bogs in Ballyconneely, and I was lying on a rock, on a great ledge of rock, and the wind was blowing the water right to the lip of the rock, and I was listening to the lap, 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 lap of the water. And a grey crow, a scald crow, a carrion crow, we called her, started circling above because I was lying so still that she thought this is carrion. And I could hear her coming down in decreasing circles, and I just thought like that the first thing she would go for if I was a corpse would be my eyes. She'd pick out my eyes. And I suppose I rather valued my eyes in the sense that they have seen the Parthenon, they've seen Chartres Cathedral, they have seen the Grand Canyon, they've seen all kinds of things. But to her they would mean nothing. She would just pick them out, and there would be morsels of food, and the glories and the wonders that I have seen with my eyes would just a morsel of meat to her. So I had something kind of strangely, for the moment, something strangely negative in her hoarse, awful call, and the lap, 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 lap of the water. Both the sounds seemed to me to be not negative, but to seem to me to not be comforting sounds. And I got up and I walked away across the bog, and a hare sprung away from my feet in the high heather. And without knowing what I was doing or deciding to do anything, I just collapsed down onto the heather, and I eased my head down into the hare's form. And I could feel the warmth of the hare, and I could smell the hare, and I imagined that it was a female hare, it was a doe. For some reason I felt this is the smell of a doe. And as I was down there, I kind of asked this wild form in the wild grasses and heathers of the bog to suck my European education out, in the way that if it was a poultice, as if the hare's form was a poultice, and I could hear the wind in the heather just above my head. I had pushed my head, as it were, back into the egg again, back down into a womb again, but this time it was a womb of unmaking, not a womb of making. And as I lay there, I thought that I want a pristine mind to start again with a pristine mind. And when I finally got up and stood, I looked away into the mountains of the 12 Bends again, and over to Erisbeg, and away out towards the ocean, next up Brazil. And I thought, now I'll make a new mind and new eyes for myself. And in the way that a mosaic maker would start with individual tesserae and put them together and build up a picture, I will start with individual sensations of colour. The colour of green sphagnum, of red sphagnum, the smell of heather, the feel of the breeze, all the sensations of sense, of hearing, seeing, touch, taste and smell. And for the moment I won't have any concepts, I won't have any big ideas. I'll just build a life, a mind and an eye from new sensations, from sensations of seeing. And it's only somewhere a long way down the road that I'll allow conceptions to come in, that I'll allow big ideas to come in and kind of take over the sensations. So the idea was that I needed not just a brighter mind, I felt that day, what we all need, is a new kind of mind. Wallace Stevens called for a new intelligence. It seems to me that the next big revolution in science, ideally, should be a revolution, an epistemological revolution, a revolution in how we think we know. But anyway, I had two kind of principles that I was bringing with me from my education. One was J.B.S. Haldane, the Cambridge scientist, who said, "It is my suspicion that the universe is not only queerer than we suppose, it is queerer than we can suppose." Now, I was delighted. Having grown up with a sense of Victorian sense of what science was. I was delighted to hear a modern scientist say that. Can I repeat it for you? It is my suspicion that the universe isn't only queerer than we suppose, it is queerer than we can suppose. So right here, at the very beginning, we are up against the place of no answers. It isn't somewhere way down the road that we're up against the place of no answers. At the outset, we're up against the place of no answers. Think of Newton standing on the shore when famously Newton said, "I think of myself as standing on a seashore. I pick up a pebble and I pick up a prettier shell, while all before me lies the great ocean of knowledge." Now, this is a huge assumption that what is lying before him is an ocean of knowledge, that the universe is knowable, that the universe is penetrable through and through to human intelligence, that the universe is, and a further enormous assumption, vast assumption, that the universe is penetrable through and through to a peculiar kind of intelligence called European or Western, modern Western intelligence. If Haldane says sooth, if he is telling the truth, then the universe is not indeed penetrable to human intelligence, because he's using the word queer in the old great Elizabethan sense, that it is incorrigible to any categories of the human understanding or any forms of the human sensibility. I can throw a net into the tide of a particular mesh, and I'll pull it out, and there's fish of a certain dimension and size in the net, and I can conclude that's all that's in the ocean. But if I throw a different kind of net with another kind of mesh into the ocean, I get other kinds of fish. It seems to me that there is something that will escape any net that we throw into it. And there's something, because it is queerer than we can suppose, no matter what net of human intelligence, and no matter how altered that human intelligence is, even if I build a new mind for myself in the bogs of Ballyconneely, there will still be that in the universe that I cannot know and will not know. And I don't even know if I'm talking about a universe. Is it a huge presumption to talk about a universe? Is what's out there, is it a universe or is it a pluriverse? Is it neither a universe nor a pluriverse? Is it something other altogether? So when scientists talk about the universe, I think they should be a little bit more humble and wonder, is it a universe we are talking about? What is out there? So if J.B.S. Haldane is right in saying what he said, then the likes of me, who is not a scientist, shouldn't abrogate to scientists sole responsibility and privilege for talking about the universe. If it is queerer than we can suppose, then I, who am not a mathematician, and I who do not work in a lab, I who merely sit and walk along the sides of Mangerton and look at Top Mountain and look at it only with the naked eye, not through Mount Palomar 200-inch telescope, I who look at the universe and see it in small, see it, even though to look at Mangerton Mountain is to see something wonderfully and strangely vast. I think it is time for poets and writers and mystics to assume the responsibility and the burden of talking about a universe that is queerer than we can suppose. William James, the great, and I think that Haldane's statement allows us to talk about it. And William James, the other phrase I would remember from the moment when I was starting to build my mind again, was William James's phrase, there should be no premature closing of our account with reality. James, having looked at the varieties of religious experience, and particularly of mystic experience, he concluded that in the way that I could go into a bank tomorrow morning and say, I'm closing my account with this bank. William James would have thought that mostly we prematurely close our account with reality. We should always keep it open. So those two principles I lived by. And what I yearned for in Connemara, living in the great place, living with the mountains and the lakes. And I mean, I would go into a wood and sit there in silence all day. And strange things would happen to you there. And there was one day coming out of an oak wood in Balnafad, was as much a moss wood as an oak wood. While I was in the wood, I saw a fern frond just turning. It was, I don't know why it turned or how it turned, because it was an unutterably calm day and there was no breeze. And yet this fern frond turned, and with almost its serrations, I imagined that it was almost like a key. And it was right there on the floor of the wood, it was opening a door into other dimensions of reality that aren't available to human senses at all, or to human faculties. And as I walked out of the wood that evening, I thought, because I'd sunk down into the wood so deeply, sunk below ego purposes, and sunk below human intention and purposes, I had a sense like that today now I knew the 12 languages of the wind and the 18 languages of the rain. Do you know what I'm saying? Like when you come away from your seeking and searching, when you come away from your lab, when you come away from the lab of your mind and your eye, and you let the world come to you, it comes to you in very, very strange and wonderful ways. It comes to you in ways that you know that what Haldane said is in some sense true. So I felt that if the universe is as Haldane says it is, and I'd always felt this anyway, that folk tale and folk story are as much places of revelation about the universe as mathematics can be. Galileo famously said, and Einstein took this up, that God designed the universe mathematically, that the book of nature is written mathematically. Now, I love the mystical mathematics. I don't want to do down mathematics, particularly the mystical mathematics as I encounter it in the rose windows of France, Les Vitraux de la France, the mystical mathematics of Gothic Cathedral. I mean, I delight and enjoy that wonderful, the geometry, the splendor of the geometry. And there is geometry in snowflakes. I'm not saying that there isn't geometry in the universe, and I'm not saying that geometry isn't entirely beautiful. I'm just saying that maybe there are other ways of talking about the universe than the mathematical way, which has been the way of the last 3 or 4 centuries. And walking into the valleys in Connemara, I would feel that folk tale lets me know, and lets, like the fern frond, that some folk tales that I knew and began to live by, they opened a door into dimensions of reality that I felt were real and existed. Can I tell ye a couple of the fairy stories, the folk tales that I lived by, as assumptions and principles? When Newton wrote Principia Mathematica, I had a kind of Principia Mythica, or a principium of stories. One of the stories is known all over the northern world. Can I just tell you a couple of them, just to give a sense of my way towards the universe? A couple of them which enable me to walk into a valley in Connemara or in Kerry and feel that I'm in the strangeness of the world and not a distorting mirror. And the moment you say once upon a time, our minds go into that strange place where all kinds of wonders and strange things are possible. Once upon a time, there was a hunter and he lived alone. Every morning he would come out of his hut and he would do a great circuit, looking at his traps and always aware of where animals would be moving in the night, maybe where the bears would be moving in the night, where foxes or hares would move in the night. And in the evening he'd be coming home maybe with a pole on his shoulder, over his shoulder, and four or five maybe mink hanging from it, or a mink and a fox, or a hare hanging from it, or maybe nothing hanging from it. And this was his life all the time. Every morning he would do this circuit and spend the whole day out and come home before nightfall. One evening, as he was coming home from a distance, he saw smoke from his chimney, and this was unutterably strange to him. And now he became as silent as his shadow, and he walked across the frozen snow silently, like the hunter he was, as his shadow. And he came and he lifted the latch of his door, and he opened it, and he saw what he expected to see, a fire down, but there was also a hot meal on the table. And he ate the meal, and he sat by the great fire. And the next morning off he went again on the great circuit, and again the next evening there it was, smoke from his chimney. And he again became as silent as his shadow, lifted the latch, and there it was again, the fire and the food on the table, the hot meal on the table. The third morning he didn't go on the complete circuit. He hid in a scot of bushes, and he kept his eye on the door. And after a while he saw a fox trotting up to the door, and the fox merely pushed the door open and went in. And now he returned to his house, even more silent than his shadow going before him in the door. And he saw a woman inside making the fire. And as he closed the door, he saw a fox pelt hanging on a peg in the back of the door. And the woman continued working, didn't turn to him, just merely said, "I've come to be the woman in this house. I've come to be your wife." And the next morning he went off, and now again, evening after evening after evening after evening, there was smoke from his chimney, and there was food on the table, and even his clothes would be hung out to dry. But then come spring, or come the mating season, and he started complaining about a smell of fox in the house. And it went on and went on. He became more cranky and more cross about the smell of fox in the house, the smell of fox in the house. And eventually he sat so far away from the woman as he could, the little house allowed. And finally one day, she listening to him complaining, she got up from what she was doing, she went to the door, she took down the fox pelt, she draped it over her shoulders, she became a fox, and she trotted away into the world. Now, that's that story. And I sometimes think that every scientific formula, every piece of deductive mathematics should be written on that fox pelt. In that way we would be acknowledging the queerness and the strangeness of the universe. We would be acknowledging that in the universe which we will never know. There's a famous Sufi parable, a Sufi story, about a man coming home every evening after work in the city, and he can somnambulate through the streets because he has walked them so often, up the main street, then into the side street, and then the next side street, and finally a cul-de-sac, and he's walking down the cul-de-sac. And as he's coming to his door, he puts his hand in his waistcoat pocket and to pick out the key to go into his house, to open the door into his house. One evening, he's coming home and he's coming into the cul-de-sac, and he puts his hand into his waistcoat pocket, and there's no key in the pocket, and then he searches all the other pockets and there's no key. And he sees a lamppost just ahead of him, shedding a very precise and narrow circle of light on the ground, and he goes over and he starts looking within the very narrow, precise circle of light on the ground. The local policeman comes along and asks him what he's doing. He says, "I'm searching for the key to my house," and he is the local friendly policeman. So the two of them start searching for this key, and eventually they get down on their knees and they're going round clockwise and anti-clockwise, and eventually the policeman gets a read in his head and wonders, it isn't here, are you sure you lost it here? And the house owner says, "Of course I didn't lose it here." And the policeman, dumbfounded, says, "Well, where did you lose it?" And he said, "I lost it over there in that dark corner." "And why aren't you searching there?" the policeman asked. And the man says, "Because there is no light there." So we search in the very narrow circle of sensory intellectual light. We search in that for the truth about what we call the universe. We go round and round, we get down on our knees, and we scrutinize it in detail. But all the while, the key to the mystery is in the dark corner. And if we are to get to the mystery, We will have to, this is where spirituality comes in. Not only spirituality, this is where mysticism comes in. We will have to go beyond our senses and our faculties into what St. John of the Cross calls the dark night of the soul, into a darkness beyond the seeking mind and the seeking heart. So I'm just trying to say like that wonderfully, was it Ken said, is it about spirituality and technology or science begin where, or come together where we have no answers. That is wonderful, but I think we have no answers much sooner at the very beginning of our quest. I remember going up into the valleys, and I'm merely talking now of feeling at one with the world, not feeling at odds with it, not feeling scientifically or conceptually or sensationally at odds with it. How do I feel at one with Glenhoken Valley in Connemara? Very often Christianity didn't go up that valley with me. It didn't seem appropriate in there. Sometimes I felt that Buddhism maybe could come up that valley with me, and that would be in some way appropriate, but at the cost of the valley. Like the valley would be made to disappear with Buddhist epistemology. Do you know what I mean? In a stream and caught a little silver trout. When I had laid it on the floor, I went to blow the fire aflame, but something rustled on the floor and someone called me by my name. It had become a glimmering girl with apple blossom in her hair, who called me by my name and ran and faded through the brightening air. Though I am old with wandering through hollow lands and hilly lands, I will find out where she has gone and kiss her lips and take her hands and walk among long dappled grass and pluck till time and times are done the silver apples of the moon, the golden apples of the sun. Why is it that that poem makes me feel at home in the universe? That poem to me is as valid a statement about the universe I live in as E equals mc squared, or as Newton's 5 laws of gravity. Is that queer? I mean, if it is queer, it is queer in a queer universe, like. And God bless us, when I came to Dublin, to UCD, like, you know, I would imagine myself still following the girl with apple blossom in her hair, do you know, because she will take us across strange thresholds within our minds. She, in some sense, is a guarantee that we won't prematurely close our account with reality, that we will always be ready for the strangeness and wonder of the universe. So this is why I would make a plea here today for poets and writers and artists, and people who are neither poets nor writers nor artists, people who are just people before they're poets or writers or butchers or bakers or candlestick makers, that everyone who is in any way in touch with themselves, with their own eyes and their own minds, are permitted and should be permitted and should feel permitted to talk about reality. Maybe not to talk about the universe, because we don't know if what is out there is a universe, but that they should be able to talk about their valley. They should be able to talk about their mountain or their river. And in talking about their mountain and their river and their valley, they are talking about the galaxy. They are talking about a universe, if a universe is what is out there. Another story that I had was, that I used to tell myself and live by, was once upon a time there was an inshore fisherman, mostly a farmer, but at times when the spring tides would go way out, he would go down and cross a channel out onto the rocks, and he would collect into bags huge stones and numbers of shellfish. One day he was out there and he got greedy, and he didn't know that the tide was running, and by the time he did look, he was cut off from the land, and he now knew that he would have to stay overnight on the sea stacks. And that night, it was a moonlight night, he heard the great rumbling out in the sea and great excitement and joy, and he saw a herd of seals coming in, a pod of seals, and they came ashore, and as they came ashore, each one of them dropped her seal coat or his seal coat, and they became human beings. And all night long, they were human beings in the delight of each other, in the joy of each other's company. At dawn, just before dawn, they began, now and again, some of them, to go down and drape their seal coats over their shoulders and go back out to sea. And the man didn't know why he did it, but he went down and he caught one of the seal coats and he waded across the channel with it. And the woman whose seal coat it was couldn't now become a seal, so she had to come up to his house with him as a human being, and she lived with him. She became his wife. He, that very day, hid the seal coat in the thatch of the house, and that was it. They had children together, and 3 children. One day she was making bread, and on a great big board table, and out of nowhere, it seemed to her, down from the thatch came a drop of seal oil. And she smelled the seal oil, and suddenly she remembered her whole past life in the sea, that she was a seal. And again, a second drop fell onto the table. And now she went out into the outhouse, and she got a ladder, and she went up into the thatch, and she dug out her seal coat from the thatch. And she went down to the shore. She draped the seal coat over her, and she went out to sea to join her seal family in the sea. And the story is that every now and again, that man will go into his children's room and he will find that their hair is combed in the night. She will have come back to a human family, because she now suffers the double allegiance of being loyal to her human family and being loyal to her family in the sea. Now, I think there is that moment that must happen to us all. The moment when, in the middle of our sense of ourselves as butchers or bakers or candlestick makers, when that drop of seal oil falls down onto our table or onto our lab or onto our laptop, and suddenly we remember that we aren't who we thought we were, that we are something much bigger and stranger and more wonderful than who we thought we were, and that we are older and stranger, and that there are depths in us that we didn't know were there. That moment of truth, when the drop of seal oil and our life as we now live it will be dissolved. We will now have a new experience of ourselves, new knowledge of ourselves. And we will be seeing and experiencing the world in a different way. So the idea of the strangeness of the world, those couple of stories, the 2 stories I've told you, and the poem, they are my principia. They are not a principia mathematica, but a principia mythica, if you like, by which I'm able to go into the valleys and, I think, be maybe sometimes beautiful in the valleys that I'm in, that I walk beautifully in the valleys, and that in some way, living from these principia, I am in harmony with the universe and the strangeness of the world. And if I were to write a book, I too would want to write it in the foxpelt, just the foxpelt suggesting, in the way that Einstein might have written his general theory of relativity on the foxpelt. That foxpelt, all the time, our guarantee that in all our talk about the universe, we are acknowledging its strangeness. Bergson, the French philosopher, I'm talking about the strangeness now of inwardness. I've talked about the strangeness of outwardness. Bergson, the French philosopher, claimed that potentially we can know everything that is going on everywhere in the universe. I, at this moment, potentially can know what is happening in a galaxy in Andromeda, in some spiral nebula maybe in Andromeda. But if I were to walk around paying attention to what's going on in galaxies 200 or 300 million light years away, and I decided to cross the street, I'd be killed stone dead, wouldn't I? Because I wouldn't see the car coming. I'd be seeing what was way out there. Now, Bergson decided, or concluded, that he talked about brain as a reducing valve. If I have a pipe of 2-inch diameter and I want to feed it into a pipe of 1-inch diameter, I have a valve between them, and that valve is a reducing valve. And he would say the brain, far from being that which enables us to know, is that which restricts the sphere of knowledge. It narrows my knowing down to practical knowing, to mostly practical knowing, so that I can cross the street without getting killed. But ideally, or in potentia at least, I can know everything. So this other way of thinking of ourselves, and this is what Huxley, remember, Aldous Huxley, when he went to California and started taking mescaline, and he couldn't understand at all what was happening to him under this mescaline. He fell back upon Bergson, in his book, The Doors of Perception, he fell back upon Bergson's idea that what happened when he took mescaline was that the valve was made ineffective, and suddenly the brain, as a reducing valve, was made ineffective by mescaline, and he was in the immensity. So I'm just trying to say, like, there are all kinds of other ways of being in the world than the modern scientific way. I think for all its successes, the modern scientific way is a limitation. It is so brilliantly successful that we think that is it. Anyway, technology has, I have to say something about technology. God bless us. About 60 million years ago, there was a land animal that went down towards the shore, and he began to live on the shore. And he would go out to sea, or she would go out to sea, and lived mostly by scavenging whatever the sea washed up, and then became expert at hooking fish out of the tide, and finally took to the water. And they became the seals and the dolphins and the porpoise and the whales. They became the sea mammals that we now know. And I sometimes think that they went a totally different way from the human way. It was as if, this didn't happen of course, but it was as if that land animal said to nature, you shape me to suit you. So she was surrendering to nature and saying to nature, you modify me, you change me anatomically and mentally so that I will suit nature. And I remember going across to Canada that first time. There was a storm breaking up, a hurricane breaking up in the North Atlantic, and I went out, did something I shouldn't do, was not supposed to do. I went out and I went down to the bow of the ship in a raging hurricane, and I looked over the bow, and there was this huge big hulk of a ship that I was in, a Greek ship with 2,500 souls in it, an ugly kind of thing, chuffing away there in the water, up and down in the sea, and nothing beautiful at all about it. But below, by the bow of the ship, was a school of dolphins, and they were so wonderful and so in tune with their world. And it seemed to me that they had gone the right way, or the better way, and I kind of greeted them. I had gone the technological way, they had gone the way of the other way. And I felt, looking at them, that they had gone the better way. Now we went, that's the way the dolphin went. That's the way the ancestor of dolphins and porpoise and whales went. Our ancestors in Paleolithic times and before, we went the way of shaping nature to suit us. And it seems to me that we have gone on and gone on and gone on, shaping nature, shaping it, reshaping it, with ever more powerful tools. And when I'm at home in Kerry and I think in the silence of the night, or in the silence of an evening, I think that we chose the wrong way, that the way of shaping nature to suit us won't work. The way of shaping nature to suit us is the Titanic way, is the way that will end, and is already, I think, ending in disaster. The Greek myth had it that human beings had no technology, and a great titan called Prometheus, he stole fire from the gods. He stole fire from heaven, because fire is the basis of technology. Without fire, you haven't metals, you haven't smelting, you haven't iron, you haven't bronze, you haven't silver. You haven't those kind of things. The fire is necessary. Dolphins don't have fire in the sea, so they don't, in a sense, have technology. We went this way. So Prometheus stole fire from heaven. And looking at the shock and awe recently in a neighbour's house here in Dublin, actually, Mary Hughes' house here in Dublin, at us using that fire, I just felt that we are neither morally nor spiritually mature enough to handle fire, to handle thunder. So it seems to me that there are two ways we could have gone. The way of the dolphin, which was saying to nature, shape us to suit you. We went the other way of shaping nature to suit us. I think it is failing already. I think it is the disastrous way. Much better, I think, it would be to ask to say of myself that I live in a universe that's billions of light years across. But that doesn't impress me half as much as the fact that I live on a planet in which a caterpillar becomes a butterfly. That, to me, is the most astounding of facts that I know. This isn't a speculation. That a creature with a long bald body, if we're talking green bald body, if we're talking about the cabbage butterfly, the cabbage caterpillar, and 8 legs, spins a cocoon, hangs from a bough, and then emerges as a butterfly. That kind of redesigning, anatomical and I suppose mental and spiritual redesigning that goes on there, and that nature does this. It seems to me that if we had spun cocoons for ourselves and let nature take over, we would emerge in better condition evolutionary than others. It seems to me, when I walk the roads, I walk the hills, in the way that there is freezing point in nature. And when the temperature drops to freezing point, very strange things happen. You have water turning to a solid, it becomes ice. If there's moisture in the atmosphere, it turns into snowflakes, billions of snowflakes. Each snowflake its own crystalline shape and its own crystalline pattern. It seems to me that there is genius in nature. Nature isn't the inanimate thing that Newton and Descartes and the others of them knew. It seems to me there is genius in the world. I sometimes think that just as there is freezing point in nature, so is there miracling point. There is some depth of nature that is a miracling. And the Taoist sages, the sages of China that we read about, and the great healers, the shamanic healers of the world, it seems to me that somehow or other they sank down into the miracling point of nature. The same point out of which bluebells come in the wood, out of which daffodils come, whatever. So if we had gone that way, of surrendering to the genius of the universe, of surrendering to the genius of our own planet, a planet in which caterpillars become butterflies, I think we might be going the better way. The saddest thing, I started by saying that the Earth is now, as I feel, HSS positive. What is endlessly sad for me is that also I think the Earth is already an evolutionary success. Because people like the Buddha have come to the end of evolution. All the Christian mystics, the Muslim mystics, the Hindu mystics, all of them have arrived at the place where they've gone beyond evolution. They have gone back into the final ground beyond evolving. We might continue to evolve in certain ways, but that in us which evolves, they have gone beyond that in us which is subject to evolution. And you know the recent theory of the 100th monkey. A macaque monkey is down by a lake and she starts washing her yam, and this is the first time she's ever washed the yam, and her baby thinks this is a wonderful thing, so the baby washes the yam. Other monkeys, macaque monkeys looking on, they start washing their yams, and it catches on. Now before the habit, it becomes a habit. Now, before any macaque monkey in that island eats her yam, she will wash it. And the story is that there is an optimum number, and they call it the 100th monkey. If you reach that optimum number, say we'll say the 100th monkey, then that habit has become a species characteristic. And macaque monkeys in islands miles away with no physical contact between them, they will now start washing yams because it has become a species characteristic. It seems to me that now so many people on the planet have become enlightened, that in some sense the human species is now an enlightened species. We've reached the optimum number. And I have a little bit of sci-fi in front of me, which means that in fact human beings are an evolutionary success as well. That's the other side of where I started from. That we now as a species have arrived at the end of the journey. We have gone beyond that in us which evolves. So we have come to the last two steps in evolution, in a sense. They have been realized in humanity. And I told myself a story there a few years ago, 10 or 15 years ago, about a planet in our own galaxy around its own star with other planets around it, but this is a middle planet. And at the time of our Carboniferous, 200 million years ago, they had reached the level of evolution that we now have reached. And they decided, will we go the technological way or will we go the mystical way? And they decided they would go the mystical way. They would sit in the lotus position and they would meditate. And over the millions of years, all kinds of new faculties emerged in them and came to birth and fruition in them. And now, when they look out into the universe, they can see the planets that are enlightened. And the universe, in their vision of it, has numerous enlightened planets. Planets that are already an evolutionary success. I go on to say that recently, downward from their morning star, they have seen a new enlightened planet. By what name they know it, we do not know, but we who live in it call it the Earth. So it seems to me that the people in that sci-fi planet who went the way of meditation and the mystical way, not the technological way, who went the way of the Dolphin, not the way of Prometheus, those people who sank down into the genius of the universe, they chose, in a sense, the better way. All I'm trying to say is that I'm deeply and profoundly worried about where we have arrived at right now. I think if I was pushed to it, I would say technology merely enables us to be more insane than we otherwise would be. I say that, I don't say that lightly at all. I just feel that of the two choices that faced us, we chose the wrong one. But the good news is we live on a planet that is, and I hope will continue to be, in spite of everything, an evolutionary success. Welcome to a species who is simultaneously AIDS virus to the Earth and an evolutionary success. Thank you. Oh yeah,
okay. If anybody would like to ask John any questions, we could do a couple of minutes of Q&A just before we break for a coffee break. So we've a handheld microphone over there and one here, just if anybody wants to ask John anything at all.
Hi John, how are you doing? My name is Fiona. Actually, I just had a really quick question. You talked about people going off to the planets and having the perfect lifestyle where they meditate all day, but would Buddha not say that there's a possibility for a middle way, and maybe there is a bit of hope for us with technology? that we can live in balance and manage the environment we live in, but also live the mystic life, you know?
Yeah, of course, like God bless us, like I'm talking about proportion. Yeah, there is a middle way. Like I would hate like to live on a planet in which I couldn't hear someone playing on a Stradivarius, like, you know, a Mozart Andante. A fiddle is technology, like the uilleann pipes are technology, the tin whistle is technology, like, I mean, you know, yeah, of course, like the instruments we have, God bless us, but maybe even without them, we could listen to a music that's in the universe, even without. I sometimes think like that we talk now about beings from another planet making touch with us, making contact with us, and there's that hope of this first hello, the first touch. And I sometimes think, looking at dolphins, that Christ, maybe there are beings in outer space, but they have bypassed us as a disaster, and they're actually communicating with the dolphins. And the dolphins are now coming up Dingle Bay, and they're coming up Doolin Bay, and I think maybe they're trying to tell us something. you know, I mean, it might be the dolphin intelligence, which would be different from human intelligence. The dolphin intelligence might be when Wallace Stevens called for a new intelligence, and this is what I'm pleading for here today. Not just yet another new theory, but in the scientist himself and herself, undergoing a radical change as a perceiver and as a knower, that I, as perceiver of the universe, will perceive it with new eyes, and that I will know it not with the old mind, but with a different kind of mind. We're not going to get that coming out of universities, because they are so bogged down in the old mind, you know, that it is hopeless. Like, but I just, God bless us, like, it would be a shame if we have made the most wonderful music. I mean, to hear Eileen Begley singing Cashel Moon, to hear someone singing the Roisin Dubh of My Lagan Love, like, they take us to such wonderful places, like, that I can only imagine the planet being impoverished if it didn't exist. But can I just say that in myself, I'm uncomfortable with anything more complicated than a spade. A spade has two pieces that I can see. It has an iron head and a timber haft. And I can get my head around that. But if it had three parts to it, I'd be thinking maybe it's too complex for me. So I'm talking out of huge limitation, okay? I'm talking out of huge imaginative limitation. I don't in any sense have a mechanical mind, because I don't live in a mechanical universe. I mean, you have this dreadful prospect. There was a book written in French called L'Homme Machine, Machine Man, or the machine human, the human as machine, I am a machine. And you had Laplace writing his great book, Mécanique Céleste, like this, the heavenly mechanism, the astronomical mechanism. At that point in the 18th century, you have L'Homme Machine looking up at Mécanique Céleste. And in that I see huge impoverishment. That to me is frightful. That to me is endgame. A human being who thinks of himself or herself as machine, looking up at a universe that is machine. No. But it is 'tis nice to have a walking stick when I'll get old and I'll need a walking stick, and that'll be a bit of technology wanted as well, you know. And 'tis nice to have a spoon to spoon up my soup, and 'tis nice to listen to people playing musical instruments and things like that, you know. I hope you have given me the permission just to be as I normally am, to think the thoughts in front of ye that I normally think and live by. Because I live alone, I haven't any sense of myself as who I sociologically am. Who I sociologically am doesn't figure in my consciousness of myself at all. It is who I am in the Hazelwood. That is the me that I encounter. And can I tell you that after 8 hours one day, sitting by a waterfall, Poleron, under the bends in Connemara, I knew after 8 hours not seeking, just looking at the water, tumbling, pouring down. This wasn't a cascade, this was a real fall of water. I knew because I had entered a rare state of mind that makes the head obsolete. Can you think of that? Can I bring news from Connemara to you? There is a rare state of mind that makes the head, with all its thinking and all its dreaming and all its knowing and all its seeking and all its aggravation, there's a rare state of mind that makes that head obsolete. So it wasn't only a question of putting my head down into the hare's form in the Ballyconneely bog and wanting a new mind in the place of the old mind. That old mind one day was seen for what it was, an eclipse. And the eclipse of my head, with all its senses, and just imagine a halo, that the head eclipses the halo, okay? And the head moved aside. The eclipse was over, and there's a rare state of mind that makes the head obsolete, an evolutionary anachronism. Can you hear that from me? We are a wonder. We are a danger to ourselves and to the planet. To the point where I sometimes wonder, are we too complicated? Are we too complex? Can we never manage ourselves at all? But good God, I sometimes think when I live in the universe, and if a caterpillar can become a butterfly, it might be that even now the whole universe is spinning a cocoon for itself, and God bless us. If it undergoes metamorphosis, what will it show up as? Do you know what I mean? When you live in that strangeness of the world, you know, human beings are a wonderful opportunity. More than animals and angels, because animals are in some sense fixed in their identity and angels are fixed in their identity. We aren't fixed in our identity, so we can be virtually almost anything. And it seems to me we are a tremendous, wonderful, strange opportunity, and everywhere almost we are blowing it. We have found the perfect way when the Buddha sits in the lotus position and meditates. Our real shape isn't Homo erectus at all. Our real shape is the lotus position. In that position, we become enlightened, if you like. The Taoists say that my shape isn't Homo erectus. The best shape is to be a hollow in the hill. Because if you take the shape, if I become a hollow in the hill, a hollow in my nature, all of heaven and earth flows down into that hollow. So we are too erect, but we still are that wonderful opportunity could we, within the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, build a Zen meditation room where we sit in the lotus position, and God bless us if we did, and we listen to the sound of one hand clapping, wonder upon wonder upon wonder, and terror upon terror would break over us. It's a shame and a pity and maybe a scandal if we blow the opportunity that we are as human beings.
Okay, thank you very much. Just